For today's video, I wanted to reflect on an interesting question that was in a book called Eating Less by someone called Gillian Riley. And that was one of the very few books on eating which I actually think contain some real good common sense and practical suggestions and really simple practical psychology too. And so she posed this question that what if no matter what you ate from this moment onwards, that your weight would not change a bit. So you wouldn't be able to gain any weight, but you also wouldn't be able to lose any weight. And then to think about, well, is there any other reason why you would want to learn or to be able to eat less or to eat differently? And of course, for a lot of people, that connection between what you eat and what you weigh gets so kind of hardwired that every eating choice sort of has that charge around it. Is this fattening food or is this slimming food? And so if you were to take that whole issue off the table and then think about, why would it be good for me to be able to eat less? That's if you feel that you eat too much. For others, it might be more. But in a sense, why would I like to be able to take control over my eating if it has absolutely no more relationship with my body and appearance? And that's when you start to realize that there is a lot more valuable reasons for having this ability to, eat what you want, how much you want, when you want. And of course, one of them is the feeling of self-mastery. That's a huge one, which brings self-respect, that I think none of us really like the feeling of one of the areas of our life being something that we don't have a grip on, that's kind of eluding us. Maybe eating less because although you might not have the effects on your weight, I'm sure that some of you will know the sort of the hangover that you get if you eat too much sugar. So the effects of your eating choices. So it kind of makes you also more aware of how does the food make you feel in your body. If you forget the weight issue, then you become a bit more sensitive to, okay, I can eat what I want in terms of weight or appearance, but what about the other effects of the food, on your mood, on your aches and pains, on your kind of mental clarity or freshness, or there's so many other ways that our food choices affect us. And so by her posing that kind of interesting scenario, I think it does bring into highlight the many, many good reasons that there are. And you can also think about your own reasons, why you would want to be able to eat less. The other concept that Gillian Riley wrote about in that book, Eating Less, was the idea of a diet being like a prison, which you might relate to. But she said, in a way, we enjoy that prison because while you're in prison, all choices are taken out of your hands. And so it gives you a false sense of control for a while, because you're not giving yourself any choice. However, of course, it is a self-imposed prison, and eventually you will break out of the prison, but you haven't actually practiced making any good choices. You've simply put kind of a blanket restriction on yourself. So naturally, as soon as you're out of prison, woohoo, you go for anything that you want. And so she emphasized that when you put the choice back in your hands in the moment, in every sort of meal and every decision you make, you're being an adult. You're not. You're actually. It's more challenging, but the progress is more real. Because in every single choice you're making, you're an adult. You're saying, I can overeat if I want, but this is what I'm going to feel, and this is going to be the effect on whatever level. But it takes that sort of steam pressure off you from restriction to indulgence, and instead you're making moment to moment choices, accepting that your bad choices are also your choices. Now, in order to make better choices, she offered 2 tools, which I thought were really very interesting. Simple, but interesting. So she said the first tool is to choose when you're going to eat. And the second tool was to decide before you start eating how much you're going to eat. Now, again, that might sound like a diet, but it's all to do with the motivation. And she said the motivation here, because actually the main reason we overeat, she was saying, was a sort of an addiction. And so what you're doing so the whole point of the book is to eat less, not to lose weight. It's a huge difference. There's many strategies to lose weight, but not many people have a strategy to eat less, because in eating less, you have to face the part of you that wants to eat more. So it's about the psychology of eating rather than some, program of calories or, manipulating your timetable or whatever. And so when you fix a time to eat, so let's say, you say, and again, you can take this whole approach at your own kind of progress rate that you want. If you're in a state of kind of extreme out of control feelings, you can say, okay, I'm not going to eat for the next hour or the next 2 hours. But she said what will happen in those 2 hours is that every excuse under the sun will raise its head to convince you that you can eat something before that hour is up. So that's literally you facing that incredible discomfortable feeling of wanting something that you can't have. But again, don't forget that you're the one who's decided you can't have it for your own good, of course. And so she said all those excuses, and all of us have got so many of them. Just a little bit, or I've had a hard day. That's sort of that's your addictive self, turning your kind of intellect into an excuse-making machine in order to get you to give in, to release that pressure. But she said, as you don't give in, as you face that pressure and get through that hour and then the next hour, that's you kind of building up your inner resources, to face those uncomfortable feelings, or to get on and do what you're procrastinating or whatever it is. So kind of in small slots of time, you're facing and conquering your own issues or addiction related to food. And in that way too, she kind of emphasized that you're not trying to win out a war, kind of a war all in one go. Sometimes you'll be defeated, but every victory, which means every time you sort of keep that promise to yourself, you're stretching yourself. You're keeping that promise. You're facing that discomfort, and you can use meditation, to face that, or you can just keep yourself busy. But the kind of main thing is that you don't let your excuses push you into giving in to that addictive desire. And then that's also the reason why she said, again, when before you start a meal, to decide how much you're going to eat, because she said once you begin to eat, the addictive desire can just kick in again, and then that meal, well, it could extend for a very long time. So then that's another time that you kind of have to face the addiction and say, okay, this is all I'm eating. And so this kind of approach, I think I loved it because it reminds me a bit of the Stoics. There's so many people who have gone to psychologists to deal with their eating, and you can talk about your parents and your upbringing, and you can go into an awful lot of expansion. But this kind of sort of Stoic approach is, just do it. And in a way that would sort of be called a masculine approach. In our eating psychology study, we looked a lot at the feminine approaches, which is sort of learning to nourish yourself and eat and cook with love. And there's definitely a lot to that too. But I think sometimes the other side of just sort of manning up in a sense of, that's a phrase that is for all of us genders. It's kind of like, do what you need to do even though it's painful. And that's the stoic approach. And that's where you strengthen yourself. That's where you build your mettle. That's where you get your self-respect, because you did what you were going to do even though it was hard, and that's how you kind of grew through it. So I'm not saying that I've used this approach all the time, but I have tried it, and I think there is some benefit in it. So the whole concept, in a sense, of changing your eating, not because of weight, because you actually want to change your eating, and not to go on a diet because you will eventually break out of the prison. Instead, it's about making informed or responsible decisions at every moment and owning that decision. Nobody's controlling you. No, you're not on a diet. You're an adult. You can eat and overeat to your heart's content, but acknowledge that you will pay for that in some way. And then, in order to strengthen your decision-making muscles, to set yourself these little targets with each meal, that until that meal comes, I will not eat. And whatever feelings come up, whatever excuses come up, I will not give them energy, because I know that they're just trying to trick me. I know that's just the habit speaking. And so in that way, I increase my muscle of making decisions and facing the uncomfortable feelings in different ways. And then lastly, when I do begin to eat, to decide before I start how much I'm going to eat. And again, not a diet. You can decide that you're going to eat a huge meal with a dessert, but that addictive desire might still kick in and say another piece of that cake, even though you've had a big piece. And so even for you, you might have eaten a lot, but that's up to you. It's a question of when you want that second piece and you don't have that second piece, that's the gain. That's you choosing to exercise power over your mind's desires. Okay, so that wasn't exactly a meditation, but that was a 10-minute summary of a really, really well-written book, which hasn't had a lot of attention. It's not a sexy book. It's a really pragmatic, humble little book full of truth. Eating Less by Gillian Riley. Okay, so good night or good morning. Om Shanti. Oh, actually, it's not a 10-minute summary. I made this video in 2 parts. Might be a little bit longer than that. But anyway, I hope that it's useful in some way. Thank you.